Well, good evening and welcome to our recovery program here at Grace Pentecostal Church in Blackburn. I don't know how many people we've got out there with all these holidays going on. I hope there are some, because this is what is regarded, I've heard it said, as God's favourite step. It's a bit cheeky that, but this is why. This is step 12, the final step, and the final principle, principle 8. And it says this, principle 8 says, yield myself to God to be used to bring this good news to others, both by my example and by my words. Well, step 12 puts it this way. Having had a spiritual experience as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Now, why this is so important to God is because what we've got here is active faith, or faith in action. And James 2:17 puts it this way: faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. Now, don't get us wrong, we cannot earn our salvation through works, by doing good deeds, and so on. But the truth of the matter is that whatever is in us, really rooted in us, will work its way out if it's real, if it's honest. If you've got a tree and you're not quite a fruit tree, you're not quite sure if it's an apple or a pear tree, then the guaranteed way to work that one out is to let the fruit appear. And if apples appear on it, guess what? It's an apple tree, because that was in its DNA, and that will work its way out into the fruit that it bears. And it's the same with us. That's why we're told you will recognize us by the fruit that we display. So this step really is the giving back, giving it away step. Matthew 10 verse 8 puts principle 8 into one line. Freely you have received, freely give. That's it. What has been poured into us freely by God, we now choose to give back freely. We can't hold on to this stuff. This is not like Gollum in Lord of the Rings, where we hold on to our precious. This is mine, I'm not letting it go. You can't pick up new stuff with your fists clenched. You have to let go. So what we're talking about tonight is giving. Not giving in unhealthy, self-focused ways. Giving as God gave, with no requirement of receiving back. And what I want to do, I want to get straight onto the acrostic, a nice little 4-letter acrostic. And the G for this, spelling out this word give, is God first. Romans 8:32 says this, that God did not even keep back his own son, but offered him to us for us all. He gave us his son. Will he not also freely give us all things? This, of course, is the opposite we've discovered in the course of this program. The opposite to the way the world looks at it. The world looks at it very simply, that it's all about me. Me first, me second, me third. We sing it, I did it my way. We talk about it, what's in it for me? Look after number one. Charity begins at home. In other words, it begins with me. This is a reversal of that, because God gave us freely all things. And when we look at that scripture, that he gave his son, he didn't even hold back his son. Will he not freely give us all things? Trust the Lord. The I in this, the I becomes we. Because holding on to stuff makes it all about us. All about us. When we give, we start to involve others. And we realize that this is a journey that we're on in recovery, in Christianity, that is never intended to be done as a solo. There is no such thing as a solo Christian. Yeah, we're all building a personal relationship with God, or somebody working in recovery. It was never intended to be a solo job. People in recovery and Christians. People who have been in addiction, and as if it's a different thing. Now, I have been 20 years, basically, free of alcohol, from having been an alcoholic. 20 years clean. But I've been 32 years a Christian. So I am not, I maintain, 20 years in recovery from alcohol. I am 32 years in recovery from the effects of sin, from the effects of being separated from God. We are all in recovery. And in the process of our journey, we have picked up hurts, hang-ups, and habits that cling to us all. And that's what we're in recovery from. And we do that with others. Ecclesiastes chapter 4 puts it this way: two are better off than one, because together they can work more effectively. If one of them falls down, the other can help him up. But if someone is alone, there is no one there to help him. Two men can resist an attack that would defeat one person alone. It's amazing that sometimes the Bible just speaks utter common sense, and we look at that and say, yeah, that's true. So why do I try to do so much in my own strength and on my own? The V in this acrostic is victories shared. Encouraging other people through sharing the victories that we have achieved through our connection with our higher power. And sometimes we can scratch our heads on this and think we're searching for victories, for big things. What has God done in your life? And we're looking for something massive. But there are small things. Sharing the victories of small things in our life on a day-to-day basis. I've shared this once in a message I gave about my problem with shopping trolleys. I had a problem with shopping trolleys. That when I loaded up the shopping after Asda into the boot of the car, if I was stuck miles away, it seemed, from where I should have taken the trolley, and it was raining, I would leave it there. It's somebody else's job to put that back in place. Until one day, I drove into Asda, started to pull into what I thought was the perfect parking space, to have to jam the brakes on to find that sitting right in the middle of it was a shopping trolley. So I got out, moved it, and I was furious. What sort of selfish individual does a thing like that? Leaves it there. I could have run into it. And God said very quietly, well, someone just like you. And since that day, I promise you this, I have never, ever left a shopping trolley anywhere other than where it should be. I wheel it back no matter what park of the car park I'm in. I even take other people's back sometimes. I'm obsessed by it. No longer obsessed by it because it's now become part of my nature. You will never, ever catch me out on that one. Now, that's not a major thing. It's not anything I'm going to write a book about. It's a tiny little victory. But it's not insignificant because in some little way, I am thinking about others rather than just about myself. I am slightly less selfish than I was before. Slightly more Christ-like. And although it's not a major issue, how many small steps do we need to take before we feel we've made real progress? Sharing the victories that we've accomplished does not have to be looking at major stuff. Deuteronomy 11:2 says this: remember today what you have learned about the Lord through your experiences with him. And that's a day-to-day business. And never forget what God has done for us. These ongoing testimonies that we have, and the purpose of them is to help others. 2 Corinthians 1 verse 3 says this: give thanks to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the merciful Father, the God from whom all help comes. He helps us in all our troubles so that we are able to help those who have all kinds of trouble, using the same help that we ourselves have received from God. What God gave into us, we can give back to others. We can give back to others, sharing those victories. See, God never ever wastes a hurt. God never ever wastes a hurt. Now, we're not to become fatalistic and say, God meant me to suffer this. It's no good me looking and saying, yeah, God meant me to be an alcoholic. No, he didn't. It was my stupid decisions that did that one. But God will never waste it. And he has used that in certain ways, to make connection with guys that we meet in prison. It's not why you did it, but you will not waste it. John Baker, who actually wrote the course that we base this recovery program on, this one, Celebrate Recovery, name on the cover of the book. John Baker was 20 years an alcoholic. And he wrote this. A bit faint up there, so I shall just read this. All the pain, all the hurt that my 20 years of abusing alcohol caused, all the destruction that I caused to myself and those I loved, finally made sense when I got to step 12, principle 8. I finally understood what it says in Romans 8, verse 28. And we know that all that happens to us is working for our good if we love God and are fitted into his plans. He took my alcoholism, all the hurts and pain, and used it to give me the vision for Celebrate Recovery. Nothing less than a miracle. To God be the glory. And because of all God has done in my life, I want to spend the rest of my life doing recovery work, although it's not really work, it's service, the service of joy. See, that's John Baker. Result of that, God used it to inspire him to produce a program, a course, that's been running 25 years in the church Saddleback in California and has ministered to thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, off the back of 20 years of alcoholic addiction. When God set him free from that, he gave it back. Which brings us to the E, and give examples of our actions. Examples. See, what will happen is that we will see changed lives. When things are happening on the inside and working their way out, things will change. Mindsets will change. I remember some guy in Lancaster Castle that we met who became a Christian up there, talking to him in the chapel then years ago. After 2 weeks of being a Christian, he came across and he said, I don't know what's happening to me. I've stopped swearing. And what's more, when people swear around me, I don't like it. I challenge them sometimes. And I'm becoming a religious freak. What's the matter? He said, no, it's quite natural. It's quite natural. Because as things change from the inside, God cleans stuff up. God changes the mindset. And some of the things that we used to be very comfortable with, we are no longer comfortable with. It's quite natural. Behaviors that we used to do, now grate on us. Hence the language. As God cleans it up. Things will change. We will be changed. 1 John 3. Verse 18 says this, my children, love must not be a matter of words or talk. It must be genuine and show itself in action. Now, the reason I've torn through this acrostic here is not kind of make necessarily a short session here, but I want to tell a Bible story now. The best story to illustrate step 12 and principle 8. It's the one that we use when we go into prison, when we were allowed to go into prison, in answering people's question about who is this Jesus, who is this higher power that we are linking people in, we are pointing towards. See, most people want to make Jesus in some kind of their own image. People have various ideas of what they want Jesus to be to suit themselves. Some people like this kind of gentle Jesus, meek and mild, full of love and blessing people, wandering around the Middle East in white nightie and open-toed sandals, sometimes cuddling a lamb. Jesus, the embodiment of love and gentleness. While others prefer the Jesus who's a bit more of a rebel, the one who turns tables over at the temple and cracks the whip on the people who are desecrating the place of God. The guy who stands up to authority, that's the Jesus that I want. While others, I suppose, just want him to be a wise guy who comes up with good teaching. But the Jesus that we felt that we wanted to present to guys in prison was the Jesus that we see in Mark's Gospel, chapter 5, in a little story where Jesus heals a guy who has been demon-possessed. But a little bit of background to the story first. Jesus has been teaching down the west side of the Sea of Galilee, in Jewish areas around towns like Capernaum. And he's having tremendous success, huge amounts of success. Thousands of people are flocking to see him and listen to him. You know, he's flavor of the month. The disciples love it, being part of all that success. This is what they signed up for. But one evening, Jesus turns to the disciples and says, "Come on, guys, get in the boat. We're going to the other side of the lake." The east side is not a Jewish area. It's a Gentile area of pig farmers. In other words, it's kind of enemy territory. And that's one of the things that sometimes happens when you connect with Jesus as a higher power and you allow him to guide you. He takes you out of what you see as your comfort zone and challenges you. Be prepared for that. They go across the lake. They experience storms en route. And when they get to the other side, what they seem to find is not a horde of people waiting to celebrate. "Oh, Jesus, we've just been waiting for you." But one guy who is demon-possessed. Now, I don't go a great bundle on demons and all this kind of stuff, blaming them for everything that's going on. I can make a mess of my own life without the help from any outside agency. So that's not the important bit. What is important is the effect that these demons, however they'd got into this kid's life, had on him. And what they'd done is to control him. Now, anybody who's been in addiction knows exactly what it's like to be controlled, to be in the grip of something that you cannot escape from, that controls every aspect of your life, that even speaks for you. And on one occasion in this story, they do. Jesus goes to this guy and talks to him, and he asks him, "What's your name?" And for a minute, the guy kind of tries to speak out and says, "My name is," and then the demons shut him up, slap him about a bit, and say, no, we talk for you. Our name is Legion, for we are many. Many of these demons just occupying this kid and controlling him. But you don't need to have been in addiction to any chemical to know what it's like to be controlled. Abusive relationships can control you. Codependent relationships. Depression. Low self-esteem. There are so many things that cling onto you through your journey in life that can control you, that can shape your thinking. And here is a kid who is controlled. But look at the effects of the control. This is how the kid is introduced. It says in Mark chapter 5, verses 3 to 5 says this: "This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones." See, look at the effects of control upon this kid. And when we're in prison in the groups, guys, look at this, because this possessed man is not given a name. But they kind of try and recognize exactly who he is. Because the first thing they've had an effect on him is he's living among tombs. His family are in a little town down by the edge of the lake. But he's living in the tombs, which are cut into the rock higher up. He lives amongst dead things. Nothing good grows in his life. And control can do that to you. It can rob you of every little bit of greenery and life that comes into your world. Sometimes relationships seem to be going all right, but in the end, what controls you rip them out of the ground. And sometimes we finish even ripping them out ourselves because we are so used to relationships going wrong that love is something that just always leaves in the end, that we almost make it happen. Rather than go through the trauma of waiting for it to happen, we make it happen ourselves. We push at the boundaries and wreck our own relationships because at least then we're in control of it. Living amongst dead things. Oh yeah, low self-esteem can do that to you, can't it? make you live amongst dead things. Anything that sparks up in your mind where you suddenly think that I can do this, in it comes and tells you that no, you can't. You will never be anything more than you are. And this kid also lived separated from what he really wanted in life, which was relationships and love. His friends and his family are down by the lakeside. He's up in the hills. And control has a way of doing that, separating you from all those people that really you wanted to build relationships with. That's why organizations like Al-Anon exist, to deal with families of people in addiction, because people call addiction just, it's a family disease. It's not just affecting the individual, the ripples spread out. One little detail that's in Luke's Gospel's version of this, not in this one, says that this kid was also naked. In other words, what was controlling him had stripped him of his dignity. Stripped him of his dignity. And control has a way of doing that. Nothing dignified about being a drunk, I know this. Nothing dignified about being an addict, but there's nothing dignified about living in a codependent relationship or an abusive relationship either. Or living weighed down by the depression that you've picked up for all sorts of reasons. Nothing dignified about that. And what has happened to this kid is not something you can just look at him and say, come on, snap out of it, tomorrow will be better. No, it says day and night among the tombs, he cried out. This is a permanent condition for this kid, 24/7, day in, day out. This for him is as good as it gets. And he cuts himself with stones. He's a self-harmer. Seen plenty of that in prison. People with their arms scarred to the hilt. Now, there are psychologists who work with people who self-harm. And I read some articles by him at one stage. And they came up with 7 emotions that lie behind the majority of self-harmers. Because remember, you don't need to cut yourself with something sharp to self-harm. You can self-harm with your thoughts in your head. You can beat yourself into a pulp and scar yourself with how you see yourself. But 7 emotions that lie behind it, and these are them: self-hatred, despair, fear, shame, depression, unhappiness, guilt, anger, helplessness. And if the guys in prison have not got it before, they get it now. And people look at it. Guys have looked at it and said, yeah, I get it. It's me, isn't it? That's me. Those emotions, they're me. All of them. Hatred of myself, despair, frightened of life and frightened of change, shame, guilt, depression, unhappiness, raging with anger at stuff, but helpless, powerless. And then we get the message, don't we? That Jesus left behind all that success, all that adulation, all the applause to cross over the lake for one person, for you and for me. What happens on this, of course, is that Jesus sets this guy free. Jesus has to. He's looking at a kid who has nothing, who's been robbed, who's been controlled. Here is Jesus who came to bring us life in all its fullness. He's got to do something, and he sets the kid free. This is the story, if you know it, where Jesus sends the demons, allows them to go into a herd of pigs, and the demons cause the pigs to go off the edge of a cliff and into the lake and drown themselves, because that's the nature of things that control you. They try to destroy you, and they try to rob you. But the interesting thing is, when we next see this kid, he's described as this. All the people hear about all that's going on, and they flock back in, and they saw the man sitting there, dressed and in his right mind. I think that's brilliant, that. They don't see some raving religious lunatic jumping up and down, waving his hands in the air. They see somebody dressed, dignity restored, and in his right mind, the mind that God always wanted him to have. The mind we spoke about way back when we were talking about powerlessness. Sitting behind the wheel of your car with your hands on the wheel, making your own decisions with irrational thoughts going on in your head. With God as your sat-nav, as your guide, as your power. It annoys me when some people say that Christianity is about brainwashing. No, it's not. Don't be daft. It's about giving you your right mind back. And the first decision that this kid makes, or thinks he makes, is this one. Very natural. It says, as Jesus was getting in the boat to go back to the other side of the lake, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Well, that's natural, isn't it? We want to go back. Take me back to your comfort zone, Jesus. Take me back where it all makes sense. Let me live in the bubble called church. Let me live in a bubble called recovery. Let me live there surrounded by people who are going to tell me I'm awesome, I'm wonderful. But Jesus says no. Not because this kid's not worthy, but because he's got a job for him to do. He says to him this, but Jesus did not allow him. Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you. Go home to your family. How much the Lord has done for you, how much God has done for you, and how he has had mercy on you. See, Jesus doesn't abandon this kid. He will always go with him. But go back first to your family. They need to see you in your sound mind. And sometimes that's the way it works, isn't it? That when God has poured freely into you, you give it away, and you give it away first to your family, your friends. They have a right to see you as they wanted you to see, to be all along. And it's wonderful when that happens, when you can give it away to your family and friends. I remember sitting once in a church meeting some years ago with a lad from Manchester called Robbie, and we were sitting in the row in front, and next to him was his mother, and on the other side was his daughter, and the other side of her was his granddaughter. And I thought, there's 4 generations sitting there with a mother saying, I've got my son back, and a daughter saying, I've got my dad back, and a granddaughter saying, I've got my granddad back. Nothing gives you more of a buzz than that, because you've given it away. But the kid doesn't stop there. He goes on to say this in the next verse. So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. The Decapolis are 10 cities in that region. So he goes to his family, and he gives away what's happened to him. They see it for themselves. And then he goes on because he knows that what's happened to him is too big to be contained. He has to give it away. So he's got to go to these 10 cities because he knows that out there are people just like himself living without hope, living in despair, thinking this is as good as it gets, scarred. But now he's got something within him and the desire to give it away, where he needs to go to them and say, yeah, I have been where you've been. I've sat in where you've sat. I've walked in your shoes. Look, I've got the scars to prove it, but they're healed. Because one day, I woke up thinking that the day would be exactly the same as every other one. But on this day, something different happened. Jesus walked into my life and changed everything. Now, when that's happened to you, how can you keep it to yourself? What has happened cannot be contained. The desire to pass on the message. How can we keep this to ourselves? How can I keep the 32 years of my recovery to myself and think it's all about me? No, it's not. It's about others. It's always going to be about others. Because that's the end of it. That's why it's God's favorite step. Now remember this, that this is not a 4-step program. Some churches treat it like that with people who have come, certainly if they've come out of addiction, they do step 1, 2, 3, and then go straight on to 12. They've been Christian 5 minutes and they're given a microphone to come and tell everybody how easy it is. It's not about that. There are 8 steps in between there that we need to work on a constant, ongoing basis. Oh, we don't have to wait years before we dare tell anybody about our recovery, our faith, and so on. But we need to understand all the other bits that go between that set us up for that. Step 4, where we're looking at ourselves. Never stop looking at ourselves and telling other people, sponsors, accountability partners. Going to God in the right way and saying, change me. Making amends, forgiveness, working at your relationship with God. We've got to put all that in place. But ultimately, the peak of it all is to do what this kid did and go out and tell people. He gets this idea of give. God first. He couldn't have done it. I becomes we when you're suddenly involved with other people, sharing the victories in his life and going out to tell people examples of his action. And that's what it's about for each one of us. Finish with this because the time is kind of upon us here. Luke 8:16 says this, no one lights a lamp and then covers it with a wash tub or shoves it under the bed. No, you set it up on a lampstand so those who enter the room can see their way. What a great privilege that is, to be a light that can show other people the way out of darkness. And when you sense that should get the hairs on the back of your neck standing up. How can you not want to do that? So that's it. I'm going to finish there. We are going to put up our normal screens at the end here for getting in touch with us through email, phone, or whatever, and do that. It's good to share things. It's this I becoming we thing. It's good to know what people are thinking out there. And we'll also put up the codes, if you've got Zoom enabled there, to tack into the Zoom meeting. So thank you for listening here. Hope you can join us next week when we're finishing off the second part of Step 12. Give us some kind of feedback. That would be good. But in the meantime, thank you for listening, and may God bless you.
There's a place where mercy reigns. There's a place where mercy reigns and never dies. There's a place where streams of grace flow deep and wide, where all the love I've ever found comes like a flood, comes flowing down. At the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in awe of you. I'm in awe of you. Where your love ran red and my sin washed white. I owe all to you. I owe There's a place where sin and shame